The music is bringing back such nostalgia. If you didn't spend your teenage years every weekend in somebody's garage or house with way too many TVs and Xboxes crammed into too small of a space doing Halo LANs, then I don't know what you did with your life. Anyway, I'm the perfect age for Halo to be majorly nostalgic. So the Campaign Evolved just came out today, at least if you pay for the premium edition, which gets it 5 days early. On that note, I did get my copy from Games Planet, and I am a Games Planet affiliate. I reject most key selling sites because oftentimes they're a gray market. Games Planet gets theirs directly from the game publishers, so everything's legit. They get their, the developers actually get their cut, all that, and I can get you 10% off. This is the UK version where they have the keys for Halo Campaign Evolved, and it is for the Windows Store. However, it does activate just fine on my US Windows account and all of that. So if you're interested, there will be an affiliate link. Anyway, so the plan today is to test out the PC performance of Halo Campaign Evolved. That's the original Halo campaign in Unreal Engine 5. Now, I already have a little bit of hesitation with this because a huge part of those Halo LANs that I grew up playing was the multiplayer, and this didn't come with a, well, at least a PvP multiplayer component, so there's that. Also, the PC version doesn't have couch co-op, so this has multiplayer co-op at least, and the console versions get couch co-op, and I spent so much of my childhood couch co-oping Halo Combat Evolved. Kind of annoying that the PC version gets left out of that. But other than those little nitpicks, I'm hoping for a good remake here. Now, I usually start out with a low-end PC to see how it does before moving up to higher-end systems, but I can't help myself. There's too much nostalgia here, and I want to see what this thing can do if you crank the graphics. So we're going to start on a 5090. Ooh, logging in. So this is apparently one of the games with the accessibility features where it starts talking menus at you. So anyway, I'll actually get the game started, and then I'll edit out the boring bits here. First thing I'm noticing is a pre-rendered cutscene that seems to have kind of poor frame pacing. I do have vsync enabled right now because, well, I'll turn it off when we're testing performance. I wanted to see if that was the issue. So vsync is currently enabled, but I'm getting weird frame pacing on that pan over the ship, and I'm seeing like 33 frames per second or so. So that seems a little bit odd, a little bit disappointing there. But anyway, first impression. So it actually seems like now that I'm in gameplay, the game just sort of ignores vsync, so that could have been part of the issue. So I can kick on vsync here, which should lock to my 60 FPS capture card. I capture on a second PC. But when I enable that, notice that the frame rate it's reporting here is like 68 FPS or so, and I'm getting judder and screen tearing, which you shouldn't be getting in this situation when you're kicking on the vsync lock. Now, when I turn it off, the frame rate does go higher. You can see I'm now over 120 FPS, so it's doing something. But yeah, something about the vsync implementation here seems to be not quite working right, at least on my setup. Now, anyway, I'd be turning vsync off for, performance capturing anyway, but like that is kind of annoying. Now, it defaulted to ultra quality preset on everything. I mean, this is a 5090, so that makes sense. We'll try some lower end stuff that's more realistic for people, but I wanted to kind of push the game, see what it can do at maximum first. And then the upscaling quality is also set to ultra, which I notice this is a little bit weird. So usually for DLSS upscaling, you would have this named quality because it's saying that ultra renders the resolution of 67%, which is the normal setting that would be called DLSS quality, and native would be called DLAA. High is corresponding to what would usually be called DLSS balanced. Medium seems to be corresponding to what would be usually called DLSS performance, and it seems like low would be ultra performance. So here, ultra is effectively DLSS quality, and if I go to native, we'll be doing DLAA. So I could try that and see if can a 5090 handle this game maxed out at native 4K. In a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games, you can dip below 60 FPS even on a 5090 if you try to max everything out at native 4K. It looks like the game has frame gen support, but that is currently turned off. And so overall, that looks like what most of the important details here. Now, I think this game does feature the hardware version of Lumen, but I was looking to see if I could find a specific place to change the whether it was using hardware or software Lumen, and I'm not seeing that. But I did hear that the game was supporting it. So maybe at certain settings here it is using that, and others maybe it's not. But I don't see a clear like turn on or off the hardware-based ray tracing version of Lumen. But I have heard in other coverage that this game does feature that. I've also heard that this game features megalights, and I believe is the first Unreal Engine 5 game shipping with megalights. We should, when we get lots of laser blasts going on and all that, get tons of emissive light sources. All right, you know what? I'm playing this on keyboard and mouse because it's a shooter, but I've such nostalgia for Halo on Xbox that I might actually switch over to an Xbox controller on a shooter, which I would almost never do these days, but it just feels right. All right, so I can already say I like what the lighting is able to do here with the red lights moving through the dynamic lighting of the scene. Just overall, I think that the graphical style of this looks a lot better than there was like the Halo Anniversary that made everything way too bright and all that when they did the first attempt at a remake of the original Halo campaign. Also, when those shots went through here, you could see some dynamic light against the walls and everything off the shot. So, yeah, I think that's looking pretty good on the graphics standpoint, but obviously not super far in. Now, overall, I've noticed the frame time graph is very smooth. So this being an Unreal Engine 5 game, I was worried we might get stutters every couple of seconds at the beginning, like you see in a lot of other Unreal Engine 5 games. But so far, that seems totally smooth. Remember, I did wait a couple of minutes on the initial load screen when I fired up the game because I noticed the CPU was clearly compiling shaders in the background. But yeah, so far frame time graph looks nice and smooth. And I'm overall happy with the graphical style. Feels like what I remember as a kid. This is what I felt the game looked like as a kid, although it clearly didn't. The Halo 1 pistol, I just got it. Here we go. Man, this pistol was so much fun in multiplayer. One of the most overpowered weapons of all time, but also completely fun and iconic. So got some actual combat happening here. Overall, frame time graph still looks pretty smooth. Got the assault rifle here now as well, but of course, pistol, best weapon in game, at least in multiplayer. Just get those headshots. Anyway, so yeah, looks like frame rates overall dipping into the 70s or so. Wow, okay, looks like there is sprint. So they have put sprint back into this. I get that if you released a modern game like this without sprint, that would probably not go over well with the general audience, but certainly was no sprint in the original Halo campaign. Now, yeah, performance is seeming pretty smooth here, even through the combat. Frame time graph still looking smooth, so I'll be curious if that changes at some point and how performance looks on different levels as we get more into an open world rather than constrained corridors. Wanted to try out some of the energy weapons and see the lighting effects and all that. And one thing I'm noticing is there is a pretty strong, seems like post-processing and chromatic aberration, which some people don't like, and I couldn't find anywhere in the graphic settings to specifically turn off the chromatic aberration or the film grain. There is motion blur toggle, which I guess I'll turn that off so some of you stop screaming about motion blur, because I already know you were doing it in the comment section. But yeah, it does not look like there's a separate film grain, which it seems like a fairly strong film grain effect, or chromatic aberration. But performance overall is looking good so far. I mean, the lighting going into the smoke here and all that, and that being dynamic. So you can certainly see they are taking pretty good advantage. What's my melee button? Which button's melee? I wanted melee. Oh no. Okay, I need to figure out which. Oh, okay, so again, I'm going back to Xbox controller. It looks like it's a thumbstick in.
I don't know how much more.
I don't believe that's consistent with the original Halo controls, just to be clear. I think that was like one of the options, but not the default control scheme. Not a big deal though. Anyway, all right, yeah, performance looking solid. I mean, it is a 5090. I think I'm gonna play through this first level and get out into the open world once we evacuate the ship and see if performance is much different. Better, worse, or the same, and then maybe take a look at some other hardware, because I know it's a 5090. Not most people don't have a 5090, but I did want to see it in all its glory, and at least so far, looks like native 4K max settings was able to stay well over 60 FPS, at least in this kind of closed-in environment. I'm going to try DLSS quality here, which I guess they call upscaling ultra in this particular menu system. Just to show that, yeah, if you actually kick that on, which is probably how most people would play it, even on a 5090, it is now well over 100 FPS at otherwise maxed out settings, 4K output resolution. So, like I said, I'll play through this first kind of ship area, get to the more open world, and see if things change much. Not really a performance note, but now that I've picked up an overshield, I'm noticing another change. So in the original Halo, if you just walked over an item, it would be used at that moment in time. Looks like now you hold it in an inventory slot and then hit the right bumper in order to activate it. So a little bit of a difference there. Overall, I've been fighting through some more combat in the ship area and averaging about 120 FPS at maximum settings with DLSS quality. Again, 4K output resolution and all that. Combat overall feels solid. I mean, I just have it on the normal difficulty for playing through the performance test at the start here. Probably do a legendary run on my own playtime. Maybe get some friends online that used to play Halo back in the day, you know, that kind of thing. All right, keep playing through this. I'm just admiring the lighting again, like on the weapon effects. So with the plasma pistol charged up, you know, you get nice reflection off this, and then if I shoot it down here, get the nice light trail across. So definitely some nice lighting effects with everything, you know, working dynamically. So there are some advantages to switching to UE5, and so far I still have not seen any stutters. So I'm hoping that continues out into the open world, larger, you know, environments, etc. But so far, so good. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing is the elites are speaking English, which is consistent with Halo 2 and beyond, but in the original Halo campaign, I do miss the wart that the elites did, so I guess it makes sense from a consistency across the games, because I'm imagining they're probably going to remake 2 and 3 as well if they already did this, which would be, you know, my guess, and I do understand the consistency, but I also miss wart. So there's that. All right, finished the first mission, averaging 122 FPS using DLSS quality on otherwise maximum settings, 4K output on the 5090. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like as we get down to more open environment, compare the performance there for a minute, and then switch to some other hardware. Okay, more open world environment. We get to see the Halo ring, iconic visuals here. Frame rates do seem a bit lower here. This is what I was expecting to happen, because just open environments usually does. So we're at about 100-ish FPS now, as opposed to the 122 average that we got for the more closed-in area on the first mission. That's with DLSS quality enabled, so let's now adjust the resolution back to native and get an idea for where that's at. So native DLAA, and okay, still averaging 70 or so. So again, not the worst performing Unreal Engine 5 game I've seen. I've certainly seen worse. I'm also hoping that we're able to keep a flat frame time graph. A few tiny blips there, but I think that was mostly just as I went in and out of the menus and such, so I'm not gonna blame that on anything. There's the Covenant dropship coming in. So these larger open areas, I'm hoping we're still able to stay stutter-free on UE5. This certainly seems to be a nice, more up-to-date version of UE5 compared to some early versions where we have the megalights now, and I think there's been a lot of performance improvements and stutter solutions in the newest versions of UE5. I'm not sure exactly which version this is. But like I said, I heard this has megalights, so it has to be a pretty up-to-date build here. So looks like as I get up here, performance went up closer to 80 for a minute there, but then dipping kind of in the 70s. So 70 to 80 or so. Look, a nice rainbow effect on the waterfall there, but anyway. All right. Oh, Banshee attack. I think I should probably, for the purposes of the video, switch to a different system, though, for some more PC performance testing. So we're going to go to the other extreme. We're going to switch over to an RTX 3060 and Ryzen 5 5600X base system, as opposed to this 9800X 3D and 5090 base system. So see how a more typical Steam user would fare in this title. All right, RTX 3060, Ryzen 5 5600X. I've just left it at the settings it defaulted to, which I'm gonna wanna take a look at, because this looks awfully blurry, so I have a feeling we are super aggressive on the upscale right now. Although performance is looking good at 80-ish FPS, I think we're having some image quality issues as a consequence of these settings to get there. So yeah, it looks like it defaulted to everything on low, which might not be a disaster, but yeah, sure enough, we've got upscaling quality set to low, which remember, it corresponds to ultra performance mode resolution scaling. So I'm gonna bring this up to high, which would correspond to a balanced level upscale, as would be typically called here. So gonna back out there. It looks like that does hit right about 60 FPS. Honestly, it was so locked on there, I was wondering, like, did vsync actually enable? No, it's off. So yeah, it looks like about 60-ish FPS in this more open area. So I imagine the closed-in environment at the beginning of the game would have performed a little higher. Okay, we're on low settings, but I would say things still look pretty good. I mean, you can certainly still see a lot of the graphical upgrades over the original game and all that. And balanced level upscale, while not perfect with a 1440p output, certainly looking a lot nicer than that ultra performance mode we were starting out with, which was below 720p internal rendering resolution. Since some enemies are dropping down here, let's throw a grenade and see what happens to performance. Here, let's get the average frame rate going. The middle FPS number is the average frame rate. The one on the farther right is the 1% lows. And the one on the left is like the current frame rate at that exact moment. And here we go. Okay, yeah, so averaging close to 60 FPS at all low settings, 1440p output, DLSS on balanced. And, you know, I think for, you know, an RTX 3060 on a 1440p display, I don't mind being at low settings if the overall graphics still look pretty nice at the low settings. I think we're beyond the days where low settings looked just completely awful. I think that this still looks reasonably nice. I'm curious if we could, I'm gonna say turn things up or anything, but I don't really want to go below 60 FPS, so I'm not sure I want to do too much else on this hardware. I think this might just be a good area, since it's our first little open area and there's an enemy fight and all that right at the start, to maybe just try out a few different GPUs in this area. I also want to take a look at the CPU potentially being a limiting factor on the 5600X. So let's keep on the 5600X CPU, but put in a much stronger GPU to then see if that can reach CPU limitations, see how far the 5600X can go here. Sure enough, we are now showing the limitations of the 5600X CPU. You can see the GPU utilization is only kind of into the 80-something% range here, sometimes the lower 90s, indicating the GPU is having to wait on the rest of the system, which oftentimes indicates either a single CPU thread is a bottleneck, or it can be the memory-related stuff, but the point is, what we're seeing right now isn't the limitations of the 4070 Super, it's definitely the underlying 5600X and DDR4 memory platform. And the frame rate overall seems to be, you know, 80-ish. Let's see what happens as the Covenant get in here. And I'll show also the graphic settings that it defaulted to. So for the 4070 Super, If you reset to the default settings on a 1440p display, it goes to the high graphics preset, which is the one notch down from Ultra. And then it also defaults to DLSS upscaling, but at the high setting, which is the balanced level upscale. So this is balanced upscaling on a 1440p output at the high settings. And again, the CPU seems to be holding things back here a little bit. Now that's on purpose. I wanted to test that. In fact, I'm gonna go down to low upscaling, meaning we're gonna be at performance mode upscaling because I want to relieve the burden on the GPU to stress the CPU. I wanna see what can the 5600X CPU do if I am putting the limiting factor of the performance on the underlying platform almost completely. So here we're seeing the GPU down in the 70%, even dipping down to the 60-something% usage range. Showing the GPU's kind of waiting around on the underlying platform. So that's what we're looking at here. I know I'm stressing this a lot because a lot of people misunderstand this kind of performance testing where we're intentionally showing what the CPU is able to do rather than the GPU. So don't blame a 4070 Super for only hitting this performance here. We're looking at the CPU side of things on the 5600X, because I think that's a fairly typical CPU that a lot of people may still have in their systems. So it looks like in combat here, we are dipping below 70 FPS as I throw grenades into the bunch of NPCs. And I doubt that this is the most demanding area of the game on the CPU or anything like that. But it looks like it stayed over 60 FPS at least on the CPU side of things with this setup. Now, to actually test out more GPU performance, I think it would make sense to switch over to the higher end CPU again so that we can look at GPU limited performance rather than CPU limited performance. All right, I've switched to a RX 9060 XT 16GB. This has similar performance to a 5060 Ti 16GB. Usually the NVIDIA GPU is like 5 or 6% faster or so on average, but they're pretty similar. So I wanted to get a modern mid-range GPU, but also get an AMD GPU tested. So that's what we're switching to here. And I still have it on a 1440p output, and I went to the settings that it defaulted to on this hardware. It defaulted to medium preset and also medium level upscaling. Now that's actually performance mode upscaling, which I think is a little more aggressive than I would like to do. So I think I'm gonna bring that back up to balanced level upscaling for a 1440p output. By the way, it does also mention that FSR4 is used on GPUs where it is supported, although interestingly, XeSS is available for all GPU vendors, but is not available for Microsoft Store games. So again, I have the Microsoft Store version of this game rather than the Steam version, and apparently you just don't get XeSS in Microsoft Store games. That seems like a problem that should get solved because it seems like a major issue for people who, not just Intel Arc users. There's other people on older AMD or even like GTX users and things like that on older NVIDIA GPUs who may be wanting to actually use XeSS as their upscaler of choice. So there is that. Now it's looking like these settings might be actually lower than what we could support on this hardware pretty well, because it looks like we're close to 100 FPS here, which again, this is a shooter, so you might want to shoot for that kind of a frame rate, but it certainly seems like we could go more aggressive here. Now let's get down in here with the enemies during the fight and see how things go. But again, this is medium settings, FSR4 balanced, and then it is a 1440p output resolution. Looks like we're around 80 FPS or so at these settings during the fight. Obviously, the opening mission would have performed higher had I been testing there. That's why we got out to the open world first. I feel like I'm still getting shot at, but I don't see from where. Maybe up on the ridge. Anyway, maybe somebody behind. Oh, there's also the Banshees and all that. So anyway, I think I would like to test out this GPU a little bit more because I think this is more representative of the kind of performance a lot of people would be getting. So one thing I'm gonna do is try going all the way up to the ultra, or maybe we'll try with the high settings. So let's try the high settings, see how that goes. Again, with the balanced level upscale, so there is that. Although, wait a second. Did it go to a more aggressive upscale? Because there's a lot of disocclusion artifacting happening as I pan that camera. So as I adjust the graphic settings, I think it might be including the resolution scaling as part of that. Well, okay, no, it did set that. I mean, it still set it high though. Interesting. It certainly looked a lot worse right there. Let me go up to the ultra settings, see if that looks any better here. Man, there's a lot of disocclusion around the gun. I'm looking at the edges of the gun as I turn here. Maybe that's an issue with the motion blur, because I think it defaulted to motion blur being back on. So let me try turning the motion blur off, see if it solves that issue. Yeah, that actually does look significantly better with the motion blur off. So the disocclusion around the gun with motion blur enabled seemed particularly bad. But anyway, so I do want to play on this GPU a little bit more and test out some more settings, since, like I said, this is more typical mid-range GPU type situation for a lot of users. So I want a little more data on how this performs. Looks like at these settings, we are at about 8 gigabytes of allocation, so it looks like they have tuned it to where 8 gigabyte users would probably be okay on these types of settings. I don't know if there's any point trying to fight a Banshee with this pistol. Probably just move along and ignore them. Fight through the ground troops up here. And yeah, so as we get into combat, it does drop more into the 80s or so range, seems like. Let's get a little further into the game before we end the video. Maybe play at some different settings. Saw it dip into the 70s at times, or the 1% lows are currently hitting 73. Overall, though, one of the key things is so far the frame time graph looks smooth. Also, we hit a checkpoint and it still looks smooth. I've noticed some games when you hit like a little autosave area or a checkpoint, sometimes you get a little hitch in the frame times. This looked pretty smooth there. Throw a grenade into here, get into this larger area. Looks like frame rates, I'm staring at the frame time, guys, at the frame rate counter, guys, so ignore my aim for a second. Kind of in the mid 70s or so. We've got a lot of NPCs here. So, seems like a decent area to test a little bit more. So that's currently with the upscaling set. So high settings, 1440p, but upscaling at quality, so not too bad. That probably is how a lot of people might want to play this. We could go all the way to FSR native, see what this looks like there. So 1440p native high settings, looks like we're a little below 60 FPS. So,
Warning.
I doubt we're at the most demanding area of the entire game or anything like that. Probably not even remotely so, but I'm gonna get drop ships coming in with some combat and all that, so good chance to test things out a little bit more here. But again, this is native 1440p high settings. I'm sure Ultra probably performs a lot worse, as is usually the case with Unreal Engine, but you don't have to play everything in Ultra settings. So get into the combat here, dipping to around 50 FPS in combat. Well, there's still some enemies here. Let's go ahead and also play around with what if the settings were all the way up to Ultra. I'm guessing things are gonna dip pretty significantly here. So yeah, looks like we're going down to about 40 FPS in combat. Dipping into the upper 30s at times, but this is ultra settings at native 1440p. Looks like the GPU is allocating at least over 8 gigabytes of VRAM. That's not always a sign you'd have problems on the on an 8 gigabyte card, but could be an indication you'd be close. So maybe stick to the high rather than the ultra presets on that type of 8 gigabyte hardware, just a thought. But ultra settings, what if we went ahead and used balance level, quality level upscaling, ultra as they call it here. Let's see if we're at least around 60 FPS. So yeah, looks like ultra settings, 1440p, quality FSR 4 gets us around 60 FPS. Let's see what happens as more enemies drop in and all that. Overall though, what I'm really happy to see is that the frame time graphs look smooth. Because like I said, in Unreal Engine, that is not always a given that's going to be happening. I'm trying to throw some grenades into the clusters of enemies and such. things like that. All right. Okay, that dipped below 60 with all those explosions triggering at the same time. But that's, again, quality upscaling on the maximum preset. So yeah, overall, I mean, it's Unreal Engine 5. At the highest settings, it's not gonna be super, super performant, but you know, on this kind of hardware, if quality upscaling 1440p output at max settings is around 60-ish FPS, I think I'd be reasonably satisfied with that. I think that's gonna be the testing I'm gonna do for this video, because honestly, I just kind of wanna play the game and actually focus on the game for a minute, because so much nostalgia happening. This is a campaign I have played many, many times over. So see if I can get some of my old friends online here maybe and do some co-op on Legendary or something. But like I said, it is quite disappointing that we don't have the split screen co-op on PC. That's definitely a disappointment. Also a big disappointment that we don't have. I don't know why I just threw a grenade there. Also disappointment that we don't have any kind of multiplayer coming with this. I mean, obviously there's still Halo Infinite multiplayer or whatever, or there's Master Chief Collection for the older ones, so like I get that there's other Halo multiplayer that can be played, but let's end the video right there.